Okay, so these notes are for biology, chapter 16.4. The title of the section is Evidence for Evolution. So, chapter 16 is about Darwin, his theory, how he came to uh, arrive at his theory, what natural selection means. 16.4 different evidences that help justify the theory. So, biogeography is the study of where organisms live or have lived. So, you can study biogeography. There are a few things to note with related to evolution. You could have birds, for example, on the same island, like Darwin observed in the Galapagos Island finches, that look similar, or like the honey creepers in Hawaii. So they're on that same island. They look very similar, but they're actually different. They are different species, closely related, but different. You also have situations in the world in which you have um, animals that look similar. Here's one on Africa. Here's one in Australia. Like I remember the last notes I talked about the rhea, the ostrich, and the emu. They look similar, but they're distantly related. Um, the reason why they look similar is because the continents in which they were raised, they have the same selection pressures, so the same kind of habitat, essentially, that makes them look the way they look. So there are and were some difficulties in Darwin's theory. Some of them still exist today. So Darwin's theory, for it to be credible, the age of the Earth needed to be old, um, and so there are different ways that this has been shown to be true. One of them is radioactive dating, which essentially use radioactive isotopes to date different fossils in the ground, um, different different places. And it showed that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. So the age of the Earth is old, so Darwin's theory can be credible. So the fossil record is great evidence for evolution, and it's just the record of the fossils from way back far to current. And essentially, so here we have fossils of more ancient creatures, or like a dinosaur you can see here, but like how an animal, essentially, an ancestor, was able to swim, but somehow it got onto land and learned how to crawl. Okay, so there's intermediate fossils is what they're called, and they need to be found to be able to show that essentially an organism evolved from a sea star to a fish. We need to find some intermediate fossil forms to show that this jump was possible. Now, the fossil record, that fossils have been found that do show fill some of these gaps in the fossil record, okay? But there are still some gaps that exist. So, evidences for evolution. So, number one, anatomical evidence. So when we talk about anatomy, anatomical evidence, we're not just talking about the human body, although this is what the picture is of. Anatomical evidence is what the human or an animal body looks like. So that's one of the evidences for evolution. Anatomical evidence. Where the arms are positioned or where the bones are positioned in the forearm, for example. How many bones, where the bones are at, is anatomical evidence. Another, number two, evidence for evolution is called embryologic evidence. Embryologic evidence. And what is embryology? It's the study of the development of an embryo from fertilization, so when a zygote forms, to the fetal stage. So it's the first 12 weeks here. In this image, I have different animals in their embryological bodies compared to each other. This is a human, this is a pig, this is a tortoise, this is a lizard. And this is actually a branch of science that you can study, and how the cells form in the paths they take in different embryos and how similar they look at certain stages. when they start to differentiate. So an example of anatomical evidence is a homologous structure. So I wrote down here an example of number 1. Homologous structures are similar structures, underline or right and underline. They have a different function. And also right and underline, they evolve from a common ancestor. An ancestor is like a common relative. So they have the same great-great-great-great-grandma, for example. This image shows the forearms, okay, of certain animals. This is a human forearm from the humerus, radius, ulna, the carpals, metacarpals, and the phalanges. This is the forearm of a cat, a whale, and a bat. The little colors here represent the same bone and the orientation or where it's located in those different organisms. So essentially, these 4 animals have the same bones in their forearms. Okay, so a similar structure, the same bone, but the functions that they use that forearm for, are different. Humans use it to swat. Cats use their forearms to walk. Whales use their forearms to swim, and bats use their forearms to fly. Analogous structures is also an example of number 1, okay? Analogous structures have a similar function, right, underline function, but a different structure. And also note, they did not come from a common ancestor. They don't have a great-great-great-grandma in common. So here's an example. A bat wing, a bird wing, and an insect wing. I wrote on the left here. Bats fly, birds fly, and insects fly. The same, similar function. But let's look at their structure. The bat wing has bones in it. So does a bird wing. But an insect wing does not have any bones in it. So a different structure. Analogous. Those are examples of analogous structures. The last type of anatomical evidence is vestigial structures. These are homologous structures that have lost their original function for whatever reason, due to some kind of selection pressure in the environment that doesn't favor that feature anymore. For example, wisdom teeth in humans are thought to be a vestigial structure because most of us have to get them extracted and we don't use them. The remnants of a tailbone in a human or a coccyx. We don't really, was there a tail there? We don't need the tail. The appendix right here is thought to be a vestigial structure, no really known use for it. In whale bones, here's the whale, end of a whale skeleton. You can see their vertebrae right here. Whales swim, they don't walk, correct? But they still have a femur and a pelvis, which an animal that would walk would have. Why do they still have it? That's a vestigial structure. The third evidence for evolution is the genetic code. What is the genetic code? We just got done learning about genetics. The genetic code is simply the 20 amino acids that are coded for by those nucleotides, that mRNA. Okay, that's the genetic code, and it's actually very strong evidence for evolution because all organisms' genetic code is almost identical. Okay, almost identical with very few differences for the organisms that are very similar related, and this shows that there has to be some kind of common descent from an ancestor. Lastly, for evolution to be a credible theory in science, any theory needs to be to be considered credible, needs to be able to be tested, okay, in any kind of like a setting. A few examples of how evolution has been tested. There were scientists named the Grants, a husband and wife team, that went to the Galapagos Islands after Darwin's time And they've done research with the finches, the same finches that Darwin observed, and have observed evolution or the development of species in action. There's actually another example about pepper moths that we will do a little online tutorial thing to learn about pepper moths. I'll just show you real quick here. Oops, that's not it. That's a video. Yeah, it's a video I want to show you. Well, anyways, we'll do a little tutorial which will show you what the pepper moths were and how they show how evolution works. So that is the end of 16.4.